right, I think we should start. So good morning again, and good afternoon, good evening to people in other countries. Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us at today's webinar, Catalyzing Stronger Collaboration on IPIA Creation. My name is Ong Pei Wan, and I head the Enterprise Engagement at IPOS International, a wholly owned subsidiary of the Intellectual Property Office of Singapore, or in short, IPOS. As a group, we work to transform Singapore's future growth as a global hub for intellectual property, or in short, IP creation, commercialization, and management. We support innovative enterprises, many from startup to SMEs, public agencies, and individuals to capitalize on their intangible assets and IP to grow and scale. To achieve this, one of our key priorities is to equip our innovation community with the important skills and knowledge to leverage your most valuable resources, which is your intangible assets, and Jingwei will share more about it later. In a race to market, there are many IP needs and challenges that companies encountered but may not anticipate, whether expanding overseas, protecting your rights, or collaborating to drive innovations. And that's where we comes in. IP Expert Series is a quarterly webinar series where our IP experts will share real-world know-how and best practices on IA and IP management to overcome challenges. And so every quarter, we spotlight a different industry from biomedical science to engineering, ICT and media, fintech, agri-tech, and food tech. So you can look forward to learning more about the issues and challenges facing different sectors and technologies. And so today, our topic is on IP collaborations, which is the key to unlock innovations. So from the poll results, we see that almost half of you guys are actually involved in collaborations or are getting into new collaborations. So this is definitely a very relevant topic to you. So, and we see that, majority of you actually agree that most businesses have valuable intangible assets to bring into collaborations, but often undervalued their contribution to the partnership. So in this webinar, you also discover how to prime your joint R&D efforts for success by catalyzing stronger collaborations for creating intangible assets and your IP. And joining us today are IP experts, Ms. Lo Jingwei, IP strategist and client lead at IPOS International, and Dr. Nancy Rashid, Director of IP and Licensing for TurtleTree. Hi, Jingwei, and hi, Nancy. Let me first introduce the speaker. So let me start with Jingwei first. So Jingwei has over a decade of experience in advising companies on IP matters. A believer in intangible assets as a driver of business growth, she has delivered strategic IP management solutions to diverse industries, including telecommunications, medical technology, information technology, and retail. Jingwei was involved in impact-driven IPOS initiative, which helped shape Singapore innovation ecosystem, such as the pioneer IP management programs for government agencies and enterprises to further business growth with IP. And Jingwei is recognized by IAM Strategy 300, which is the world's leading IP strategist. And for Nancy, other than an inventor herself, Nancy has a wealth of experience as a regulatory consultant for tech companies, including 10 years as the principal licensing officer at UC Davis. She has nearly 20 years of experience evaluating inventions for patentability and commercial potential, filing patent applications, managing patent prosecution in diverse technical disciplines, including medtech, plants, chemistry, health, nutrition, medicine, just to name a few. She also simultaneously done negotiating, drafting, and executing agreements for licensing of IP and strategic partnership for development and collaborations. And she has also completed various deals with industry, academic institutions, MNC, startup, and national lab. And I'm sure she has a lot to share with us in today's discussion. So, as a host, I would just like to brief you that in the midst of the presentation, if you have any questions to ask our speaker, feel free to type your questions using the Q&A function on this platform, and we'll try to get them answered during the Q&A segment. So without further ado, let me pass the time to Jingwei first, who will share insights and practical advice on this topic. Jingwei, over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Pei Wan. Just give me a minute to pull out my deck. Let me know if you see the screen. Okay, thanks everyone for joining us here today. Jingwei, as Peiwen has introduced earlier, I'm an IP strategist with IPOS International. Essentially, we work quite closely with government agencies, enterprises, as well as the ecosystem to foster better IP management capabilities in our businesses in order to help them grow. It's a pleasure to be able to speak to you guys today and share a little bit more about our experiences with regards to IP concerns and collaborations. So I'll just quickly mention what IPOS International is about. We are actually a wholly owned subsidiary under IPOS, and we have the mandate to actually help innovative enterprises grow using intangible assets and intellectual property. So we mainly support businesses and professionals through three main areas of training, providing the industry and technology insights through analysis of patent databases, as well as advisory, which is the team that I'm in, to help companies drive their business growth with intangible assets. So we saw from the poll that everyone, majority of us actually agree that IP is something that's very important. And so I won't really touch on too much of this, but this is essentially a chart that was done by a study that was done by Ocean Tomo. And we all know that nowadays intangible assets really contribute to a large portion of a company's value, and it really can't be ignored anymore. So this is the US stats, but in Asia, right, increasingly we are seeing that innovative economies here are starting to value IP as well. So the Singapore companies need to do the same. So in our interaction with companies, right, we're starting to realize that they are getting more savvy about intangible assets and IP and trying to use them to strategize and push for commercial benefits. So this chart, right, essentially shows that imagine, if you have a successful product that is not protected, you would actually be worried about others copying and undercutting you before you can even gain enough market share. So from the time you launch, you'll be like, oh, okay, thinking of how you can actually protect yourself. So securing strong IP rights, right, can actually help a company block its competitors for a period of time while you capture more market share. So when the consumers are used to your products, and then it's more likely that they'll come back to you to continue buying your services or your products. Okay, so the benefits to actually securing different kinds of IA rights, right? By securing different IA rights, we mean that, let's say you are a technology company, right? Don't just focus on your patents. You should also consider other things like maybe your brands, maybe some of your trade secrets, etc. And these can actually allow you to better plan your IA or IP strategy to support your business goals. So for example, if others have to actually come to you, right, to get your products and your services, instead of readily finding alternatives, then you basically have a lot more opportunities to create different revenue sources, which is shown here. So you can see that, okay, maybe the first one in the case where it will be IA, right, you may only be able to sell it yourself because no one else would actually maybe license from you, which is the next part where you have more options because you start to have something that people want and they're willing to pay you for access to it. And then if you have a strong IA, that's when you can have, multiple ways to license it, because intangible assets can actually be, has a lot of different kinds of rights which you can cut up and you can actually deploy them in different ways. So there's a lot of creative ways by which a company can make money using intangible assets. Okay, since the topic is on IP consideration and collaborations, right, I'll actually briefly share a case where IP actually hindered the progress of the collaboration. So this party actually came to us because it wasn't able to get its tech partner to agree to park its IP in the JV, which it felt it needed in order to have better control of the technology. So this is a very common issue where two parties actually agree, okay, let's collaborate, and then they kind of get stuck because, okay, who would own what IP or what you're going to contribute? And then people start getting a bit uncomfortable. So what we did was we actually went into how to understand what the client really needs from the other party and what it was contributing to the deal. Because understanding what you are contributing to the deal actually helps you with your negotiation position. So this company was bringing in both investment as well as market access. Market access, I mean, you might not think this is really an intangible assets, but to us, right, without market access, how are you going to be able to sell your products anyway, right? So it is something that is somewhat intangible and valuable to a potential partner. So we were actually able to provide an assessment of who has the bigger bargaining power, as well as provide a framework to guide the client in the negotiation, which eventually led to a successful formation of the JV. So why collaborate? I think this is, anyone who's attending this session kind of really knows why you want to collaborate. I mean, it provides you with access to resources such as your technology, funding, market, which includes network, to allow a company to scale faster. And in the process, right, it may result in more intangible assets being created jointly over time. So for smaller companies, right, most of the time what we've heard is that collaboration is practically a given nowadays in order for you to actually grow your business faster. So other than the question of maybe, the company has to ask itself, who do you collaborate with? A company that has a weaker bargaining power should also consider how it can keep potential partners interested to continue collaborating with them. And this is where we come to intangible assets. So oftentimes, right, the advantages that a young company has when you are not really in the market yet is that is actually the kind of intangible assets that you have that a bigger partner may find difficult to access to. So they may be interested to work with you because of your technology. And some of these may or may not be registrable rights. So you don't have to think that, oh, I need to have a patent before I can collaborate. That's not always necessary because there are some products or some technology that may not suit patent protection. So in this chart here, right, you'll see that other than the registrable rights, right, which you may be familiar with, that would be the ones in orange. So like patents, the trademarks, the domain names, registered designs and plant varieties. These are all IP rights you can register with IPOS, except for domain names because that's by HDNet. And then the rest around it, right, the purple ones are actually non-registrable rights. Not that copyright is not registrable, it's more like copyright is an IP, right? But you don't have to register to actually own it. But the rest of these, right, you would find that usually you won't have anywhere to register. So what do you actually need to do to protect yourself is, our advice to companies would be putting in place some management processes to actually handle these things and also to recognize that they are valuable assets to your business so that you can actually make sure that you are treating them correctly and not just giving them away for free. Okay, so for example, right, some of the intangible assets that you might find in maybe a telehealth startup could be contributing to why a collaborator wants to work with them, right? Maybe in things like its know-how behind how they actually design a software process. The thing about startups is that they are very agile and they tend to be able to come up with new innovations more quickly than a bigger company can because of the corporate structure. So that's what makes them very attractive as a potential collaborator. Okay, so your know-how around how you are designing your workflows, your software, your processes, as well as your trade secrets around, certain software codes at the back end, right, could actually be the reasons why a collaborator might want to work with you. Okay. So as you work in a collaboration where you may jointly develop new products, you may end up working on go-to-market strategies, and in the meantime, you might assess each other's technology or intangible assets. There would usually be some exchange. It's quite inevitable that you will end up sharing a bit about your intangible assets, and also it could lead to creation of new ones. So, which the new IP assets, right? Both parties may want a stake of it. So what kind of intangible assets consideration should you then have before entering a collaboration? Okay, the first thing that usually I suggest you consider is to really understand why are you collaborating with this particular party? What do you want from them? Oftentimes it's not just so straightforward, that like in silos. They would probably be mashed up together in exchange for investment. Then they might want access to your technology, and then you might want access to their markets, etc. So in each of these things, right, if you receive a term sheet on your table, look at it and see what are you giving up in exchange. For example, if you're getting funding, right, what do you need to share, okay, to get it? And then if it's for market access, right, think of whether there are other ways for you to actually bring your product to the market. For example, maybe if what this party's potential collaborator is asking for could be a bit too much, you might consider, okay, can I actually access this market through other means? Maybe through distribution, through certain sales agreements, or would there be like more strategic reasons for collaboration? For example, maybe it's a new market and the other party is much larger and you can write on their branding to grow your brand in the market. So that could be a strategic reason for you to want to work with them for a certain period of time. Or they may also have access to certain data that could be useful for you to quickly scale your technology solutions. So if you are working with a company for technology that may complement yours, what kind of rights would you need to secure for the resulting product or solution? You have to bear in mind that IP rights are territorial, so you need to ensure that you obtain the necessary rights for your markets of interest too. Okay, so you should also consider that the collaboration, right, should actually support your business growth plans. So always go in thinking, okay, what do I want out of this? Is it maybe eventually I want to be acquired. If that's the case, you can work towards that, because knowing that in your negotiation with them, you have to start planning for making yourself so desirable that they will actually acquire your business. Okay. So secondly, right, you need to know what you are actually contributing to the collaboration. Example, in the case of what the other party actually needs from you. Okay, as a company that is maybe smaller, you may have a lot of different types of intangible assets in your business, but not everything needs to go into the collaboration. Okay, so be clear about what you actually need to get out of it, so that you can actually better assess, right, what are you actually willing to contribute to the deal. Okay, so your most valuable intangible assets, right? Please be more careful about it. You may want to make sure you separate them out to make sure that you don't share the most valuable assets with a potential collaborator, because all collaborators, right, have the potential to be a potential competitor in future. Okay, so when it comes to background IP like this, right, there are a lot of several concerns, but primary concern that we hear from companies when we talk to them is they're a bit wary about entering the collaboration because they're afraid that once the collaborator gets access to understand how the technology works and all this, right, they will no longer need a partnership. Okay, so these are some of the potential risk areas that we have we realized over time. One is that you may be revealing your key trade secrets to collaborators, and then after sharing, right, sometimes trade secrets you can't claw it back. Usually they will retain it, right? So how do you make sure that you have in place some form of processes that requires them to maybe destroy those things, and also there could be cases where your collaborator may use your IP for other projects. And there are also a lot of situations where there's unclear ownership of background IP, because you are going to bring in your own IP rights. The other party may bring in their own IP rights, but it could be that those background IP were developed in collaboration with other people as well. Okay, so there are various ways by which you can potentially try to mitigate it through maybe being very clear about what you're bringing into the project, creating a sort of register that actually gets signed off by both parties, having clear clauses on the use of the background IP, right, is I think is quite fundamental. You need to be very clear what they can use it for. For example, you may see some collaboration agreements. They could say like, okay, the background IP is only for the purpose of this particular research project. And if there's any further commercialization arising from this foreground IP that's created, right, that would be separately negotiated. Okay, then you could also silo critical information through the use of things like NDAs, and then maybe physical copies rather than sending via soft copy, for example. And the last one is actually, I think, is something that a lot of people forget, but clear communication with your ground staff, because actually many of the skills that get transferred between companies during collaborations, right, they are really not covered in the formal terms of collaboration. So the terms of collaboration will cover very high level and say, oh, all these things, but operationally, right, what gets traded is actually determined through the day-to-day interaction of your engineers with the other parties, and then who says what kind of relationships they have, and also the access to the facilities, etc. So it is in these areas that potential unintended transfer of information, important information and skills can happen. And then that's when you want to make sure that there's very clear communication with your ground staff, not to share certain things. Okay, so the third one, right, actually is for you to consider what rights do you actually need. And this is very important because, other than access to markets and all that, right, collaborations tend to result in new IP rights occurring, especially if it's relating to research. And most of the time, you can actually have a separate commercialization contract negotiated because your other party is also unsure what is going to come out from it. So they would not want to bind themselves at this point, but they will just have generally we'll agree to collaborate, and then we have a separate agreement to commercialize. But the collaboration agreement may already state upfront that the IP right could be jointly owned. Okay, so this is another very common thing that we see in term sheets. And what does actually joint ownership of IP actually mean? Okay. So if you see from the chart, right, a sole owner would have all the rights. You can use it, you can license, you can sell it. But in a joint ownership, right, generally both parties will have the rights to use for their own purposes. But if you're planning to license it to someone else, or to maybe sell the IP rights, right, you will actually need the permission of your joint owner. So this is where your commercialization agreement actually sets in. And it is really important to be clear about what kind of rights you need including a potential background IP rights from the other party, if that is necessary for you to use the new IP rights created. Okay, so some of the things that you also need to consider, right? The practical things are like, who would actually decide and pay for the protection? Would this actually affect manufacturing? Because sometimes in your manufacturing, you might need to sub-license it out to a contract manufacturer. So the rights to license need to be included. And then that manufacturer could be in a country that maybe is not part of your territorial agreement. So you have to consider where this would be. And then how does it actually affect investors' confidence? Because if your investors hear that, hey, your IP right is actually jointly owned with someone else, like your core IP, then they might be concerned, okay, is the other party actually someone I'm comfortable with, or is it a potential competitor, etc. So these are things you might need to consider in the long run. And also who enforces. Joint owners tend to need to enforce together. If your other party is your collaborator is someone who, or an organization that generally don't enforce rights, right, because of potential reputational risk, then you might need to make sure that in your commercial agreement, you say, I have the rights to actually enforce, okay? So in summary, right, for this very short sharing, right, I mean, we just want to flag up that a well thought through collaboration can meet your business needs and can really help business grow really, really fast and build the branding and access to the markets. But you need to be clear about what you want to get out of the collaboration. You also need to be very sure what you're going to bring into the deal and make sure that whatever you bring in, right, you can secure them in some way, okay? And when you actually, whatever arises from it, right, you make sure you obtain necessary rights to meet your commercial needs, including that of the other party's background IP if it is necessary. Okay? So these are the 4 key takeaways that I hope to leave you all with. And we are happy to chat further. We have got free business guides on our website, which you can read through. They're quite informative and useful for anyone trying to pick up some of this IP management stuff. We also have complimentary IA chat as well, which you can arrange for a chat with us if you have specific questions. And you can reach me on LinkedIn as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Jingwei. Hey, Jingwei, before you go, right, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Do you like to drink milk or consume dairy product?
Of course, you need calcium.
Do you know that actually the dairy industry actually accounts for 4% of man-made greenhouse gas emissions?
Wow, okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so it's true that, according to the Food and Agriculture Organization's data, so as consumers become increasingly conscious of sustainability and health, and more people are turning to plant-based milk. But some dairy lover like myself, right, remain unconvinced by the taste and want alternative that rival the taste and functionality of animal milk. So the good news is actually there's one biotech startup from Singapore who has a solution. So let's hear from the founder.
Fengru Lin co-founded TurtleTree in 2019. With over 30 employees in the United States and Singapore, the 33-year-old is developing technology to grow milk from a cell.
The method that we are able to use allows us access to milk from cows, goats, camels, and even human milk. Our first product is human lactoferrin. It's a protein that is found in human milk, and this protein helps with iron binding, it helps with immunity. We are really helping to close the gap between infant formula today and breast milk. As for the other markets, lactoferrin is being used as a supplement for adults today.
Lin says she expects the human lactoferrin to get regulatory approval in Singapore this year. But targeting both the infant and adult supplement market, there are still hurdles to overcome, including convincing adult consumers to buy human milk products grown in a lab. For now, investors are less concerned. Lin says TurtleTree has raised over $10 million in public and private funding. A tomorrow with more choice than ever is coming, and sooner than you might think.
Right, it's so amazing, isn't it? So this video is published in 2021, and I'm sure there has been progress since then. I heard they have raised even more funds. And so I can't wait for Nancy to share with us more about TurtleTree and how TurtleTree has leveraged on their strong collaborations for their IAIP creation. So over to you, Nancy.
Thank you so much, Pei-Wen. Jinwei, that was a fantastic summary and introduction all the way to critical advice for anyone who is I shouldn't say for anyone who's considering collaboration opportunities, it's really a necessary action for startups in particular, but I think everyone. I mean, I've also seen it from the other side. The established companies, they need to keep up. They need to pivot. They need to access technology, innovation drive that is maybe not housed within. And so it works both ways. I am thrilled to join you this evening in the States. And yes, after almost 20 years at a university with some working with startups on the side as well, and some consulting, helping multiple startups move out of the university, helping external multinational companies access technology that was born at the university. I decided it was time to go all in. And TurtleTree is the perfect next part of my career. I am thoroughly enjoying the adventure and the challenge. We are going to do it. We have already, as you mentioned, have accomplished so much. We've had excellent success fundraising, but also on the science and technical side. This is exactly the kind of company that I want to be with and the mission that I want to be behind. It's not just getting more users or more likes or more market share. We are actually tackling a very difficult problem which will improve and impact human health as well as the environment. So we can't do it alone, right? Would you make an entire meal from just one ingredient, or would you access additional things that you need in order to broaden the flavor, to accomplish what you're working towards? It's the same with joint collaborations, and a lot of times they're brought on by some external need. If you think about the 2008 financial crisis, for example, there was a lot of change going on and maybe not being able to access funding. People suddenly who were very risk tolerant, were risk averse. So big and small, they were kind of pushed into some collaborative opportunities. Another example with COVID, right? How else were we going to get these technologies, specifically vaccines, but all kinds of things that we have used to battle this pandemic? Oxford University worked with AstraZeneca to come up with a vaccine. The list goes on. And so if we were to be so arrogant as to say everything we could do in-house, maybe, but we might miss the market opportunity. We might fail. Why not take advantage of both of our immense internal intelligence, drive, abilities, acumen, but also leverage what we see externally. And that could be by accessing wholly external technology, or it could be by creating something together. So there's multiple reasons to do that. That maybe we need funding, maybe we need to move faster, maybe we need to access someone else's infrastructure, maybe they need our agility or our technical abilities. We have top-notch scientists and executives that are thinking in a very different way from the other companies that are out there. Maybe we need geographical or political kind of connections in order to access a market or to get market acceptance of something. Maybe someone else has a fantastic market, supply chain and branding that's already accessible if we partner with them. So when you are approaching the idea of collaborating, think about what the strengths are from the potential collaborator. The reason to go into a collaboration is not to find someone who's just like you, but to access something that is complementary and that will launch you up to another level. So what strengths do they have to offer? Now, some other aspect that you might not think about is, when do you need to make a potential competitor actually join your team? So that may also be the inspiration for collaboration. Trying to kind of combine forces or mitigate a risk before it occurs, right? If somebody else is racing neck and neck, maybe you can do it better, faster together. So I think the best innovators have an interplay between internal and external innovation. And this means that you do have to look at the overall view, and you have to look at it from a here and now, but also the past and also the future. So what do you already have locked up? What might occur as you work with your collaborator? And then what might happen after that point? So for example, could you also need to look at put alternatives, right? So is there something you need? Look first and see, can you do it internally? Of course, as Jinwei said, she addressed very aptly all of the risks. If you can do it internally, of course, that's fantastic. But maybe you don't have that expertise, maybe you don't have that funding. So could you acquire it, or could you contract with a company to do it, and then you don't need to, then they're going under your instructions and doing it for a fee, and maybe you don't need to get into a joint development agreement, but it's still something of a collaboration, right? You are accessing some resource that maybe you would not be able to do internally, while you're in the scale up phase of a startup. So I'd like to maybe talk about some stories of successful or watch out stories. And I'd also like to give you some tips to think about before you embark upon a collaboration. I think I will start with some of the best practices. So I don't know if I numbered them. Let's see, maybe let's say 4 tips, I would say. One is to plan ahead as much as you possibly can. So I think Jinwei had mentioned to review what's your background IP, what do you plan to get out of the collaboration, what will happen going forward. I would go even more in depth than that as well by saying this is part of it. Get intellectual property assignments. So first of all, look at your own house. Make sure your house is tidy. Do you have employment agreements that every employee hereby assigns their inventions to the company? I'm sure if any of you are in the patent field, you may have followed the kind of pivotal moment for patent geeks in recent years, which was where an inventor, it was kind of standard that inventors, employees would have contracts that said, I will assign my inventions to company, university, whatever. Well, some things happened. Somebody signed a couple of those agreements, one with their university, and then one with in a kind of a consulting and external role with a company. The one with the company said, I hereby assign. The one with the university said, I will assign. Went through the courts. The determination was that the hereby meant that anything done at this point in the future would be assigned to the company. The will assign was a promise to maybe do it sometime when you feel like it. So make sure that you have hereby assigns language in your employment agreements, and anyone that you are working with, if that's at all possible to do that level of diligence, require that. Now, one way is, you're not going to, go into their records and check all, 2 employees or 1,300 employees. But what you could do is put in your collaboration contract that they agree that anyone working on this project, from their organization has assigned intellectual property obligations to the company. Secondly, actually a little bit more on the plan ahead. Would you handle disputes? So think towards what happens when things go wrong. As you construct this collaboration, the point here is whoever is here now, me for my company, for TurtleTree, whoever is here now for the other entity, maybe we got along great, we had an understanding, everything's going great. But later, when we're not there, or somebody acquires a company, all they have to look back on is what the words were. So plan ahead towards the time when things are maybe not going so well. When how would you handle disputes? Put some language in there that talks about maybe having a joint committee, a couple of representatives at the executive level from each organization that need to talk through things first and progress that way. If there is an obligation in a contract to try to work things out, then maybe you can avoid litigation later. So secondly, kind of leads right into that plan for termination. For better or for worse, this thing is going to end at some point, right? The patent life has run out, or the product didn't make it, or you pivoted, or you got acquired, or you acquired them, something like that. So make sure there is some sort of term and termination where you're dealing with confidentiality, with trades, what happens to trade secrets, what happens to patents and jointly owned property after this relationship dissolves, for better or for worse. Also have some points where you can exit gracefully. Maybe you don't want to be tied up in this relationship anymore. Maybe you found a better partner. Maybe you've changed your mission. Maybe funding has changed. That is the way to stay alive as a startup. So for example, maybe if there's a failure to achieve regulatory approval or a failure to meet market demand, these are things where you have the ability to terminate the relationship or agreement, right? You've already put that in there. Third is a third tip that Jinwei mentioned as a mitigation strategy is excellent. It's exactly what I would recommend as well. Limit the engagement. Think about first taking a stepwise approach. You wouldn't jump into a marriage or a job or buying a new house without doing a little bit of checking out the situation, right? Doing a little bit of research. So why don't you first do an NDA, talk about things, but maybe not talk about everything. If you get to the point of wanting to proceed with such a collaboration, then talk about field of use, talk about the information shared. I really loved her point about communicating with those on the ground, so to speak. Communicate with your scientists, with your marketing people. Let them know what is the scope, what's the boundary of this collaboration. That can help avoid problems down the line too. You can always expand your engagement. Hey, things are going great. We're gonna work on this milk project together, whatever, for everywhere. Fantastic. But start small, see how it's going, allow yourself options. You don't have to share every detail of your company with everyone you might want to work with. And so that brings me to my final and fourth tip, not final. I'm sure once we get into discussions, we'll have lots more advice. We like to give advice, right? Have with experience, who's creative and who is forward thinking or future thinking. I mean, it's kind of funny. We're all scientists and kind of business people, right? We think we're so rational. And so, you know, we're going to make decisions on a fact basis, but we're also a little bit kind of like fortune tellers. You know, we're looking into the future, trying to see what could happen. We don't know. So it's this kind of a fun blend of things that we handle in our expertise. So have someone who has some experience seeing deals gone well, deals gone bad, who has some experience seeing different ways of doing a deal or of writing up some language, who can also be a little bit critical about looking into the future about what could go wrong, assessing the risk. So what I do is I always say, these are the things that I can see at this moment that are risky. And then I say, these are ways that we could mitigate the risk. And then move forward. Once it's decided, go forward all in with all enthusiasm and positivity. There is no other way to do it, right? This is a partner. This is someone who may help you make it. So after that difficult negotiation, after not knowing, should we be working together? I don't know, is this going to work out? Commit. Go forward, make it positive. That's what's going to make it happen, because at the end, we're all people, right? We are negotiating with someone, trying to have the upper hand and get the best deal. But in the end, we need each other, obviously, or we would not have started discussing this possible collaboration. And so, you know, remember who's on the other side of the table. We're people. But those are, I think, that will set the stage for having a good relationship for when you do need to discuss how to handle, you know, IP issues in that joint development or collaboration. I'm going to pause here in case we want to do any questions or we want to jump into some panel discussions.
Sure. Thanks, Nancy, for your useful insights. I think your sharing is really complement what Jingwei has shared. I especially like the point whereby you talk about the exit plan. So, you know, Jingwei talk about a well thought through collaboration. It's so important, right? And she talk about, you know, what to bring into, what you need to identify what are your intangible assets that you bring into the collaboration. But I like your point about, you know, so what are you going to take away from the collaboration and to make sure that things end up with positivity. All right, at this point of time, maybe let's invite Jingwei back onto the screen and we can have some, you know, interesting discussion. I have a couple of questions that I would like to ask on behalf of our attendees. And I see a lot of good questions coming into our Q&A box as well. So, Jingwei, are you here?
Yes, sure.
Hello. Okay.
Hello.
So I'm just thinking, you know, just a candid question. If I'm super risk adverse, do you think I can avoid collaboration today? Totally, can I avoid collaboration totally in today's world? What do you think?
Okay, I'll try answering that first, and then I'm sure Nancy has something to share as well. Okay, so I think it's unlikely, as we have all noticed that we are no longer working in just a single market nowadays. And for most companies, you won't have all the resources. And given the pace by which things get rolled out into the market nowadays, right, you no longer have the luxury of time to work on your own to slowly try and bring a product all the way from research to productization. I mean, it's not realistic for any businesses to try and do it that way unless you have access to a lot of resources. But there are many types of collaborations, and you can always, if you're very risk averse, you can craft out something that actually meets your risk profile. Okay, so all businesses will face certain risks. So it's a matter of really weighing your pros and cons when you make any business decision. So like I was chatting with a company the other day, and they were very open with sharing things with their client, but not with their suppliers, because to them, right, they actually see that they don't see the clients as potential threat. Okay, so that was a business assessment that they made with regards to that risk. You can, of course, keep everything internally, and then you might end up not being able to get that client on board. Yeah, so that's that's just my thoughts about collaboration in today's world.
Nancy, anything to add from your side?
I do. So I would agree. The only way to avoid collaboration is if you really have all your skills, all of everything you need in your own house. Now, I do have one example of a company that I've been involved with. It's called Solaris, and they have done, it's a, fatigue fracture modeling engineering company. And they have done all of their software coding, millions of lines de novo. That is highly unusual. Nobody does that. Okay. But it's been 10 years in the making. And so they have written every single line of code. Now, especially in software, that does not happen. You use somebody else's, code and you build on it, you make an app, you don't, you clicked through all of these different licenses where you said, yes, I'll use it. Yes, I'll share with everybody. No, I won't. Usually there's a whole bunch of stuff that you have to untangle to figure out who has the right to do something like that. There were in fact, that's something we haven't touched on. There's often collaborations that have occurred that you had no, actually, maybe you did mention that. There, background IP, right? That you may or may not know about, that you may or may not have had control over. Your partner may, or you may need access to some background IP in order to do something that you're doing together that neither of you knows about or has control over, or that sort of thing. So especially in software, most of the time you don't even necessarily know the full provenance of what you're working on. That you kind of got to look through the genetic code, right? But so this particular company, they have done everything completely in-house, but that is highly unusual. Big, small, anything. I mean, really, even the initial collaboration level can be small. You can have an intern, you can hire somebody as a contractor. If you're super risk averse, start that way. Go and do the bite size, take your little, appetizer snacks of collaboration, and then hire them on if it's working out and you really want to avoid risk, right? You can do things stepwise.
Right. But collaboration brings you a longer way in an easier manner.
Yes.
So
that's one of the reasons that I'm thrilled with my role in TurtleTree, because we are not, we have a saying in the States, NIH, right? So National Institute of Health is what people think about, but it's actually it's kind of this joke, right? That that a lot of big established companies often operate on an NIH basis and not invented here. They just won't even, consider that anybody else could do anything better, and that kills them, or it slows them down, right? So with TurtleTree, we are, oh my gosh, I just so admire our internal talent, but we are also open to what will get us to a better health and environment solution fastest and with the highest quality.
Wow, that's fantastic. Yeah. So I was just thinking, right? Usually when two parties sees an opportunity and they get into a collaboration, they're usually very high, and they're usually not clear about who owns what at the beginning, and it's not important, right? I mean, it always started well until the product become a successful product and it becomes profitable. Then this is when disputes starts, especially they wanted to sort of like end collaborations. So if I have already started a collaboration, but unfortunately without proper thought through or proper planning, what can I do now actually? Any advice?
Yeah, sure. I guess I can take it first and then Jinwei. Pause. Absolutely pause. Okay, at any time. And also I would say an overall strategy, like I said, you plan ahead, you decide, yes, we're going to enter the collaboration, and then you move forward with positivity. If you possibly can find the bandwidth, you should periodically revisit it because things have changed, right? You should be checking, you should be having your scientists and your technical people letting you know of inventions as they come up. Because this may change how you see the agreement. You should be regularly revisiting the agreement and seeing, oh, now I don't like that particular part. Go ahead, talk about amending it. Things may have changed, right? Things grow, they morph. It's kind of like a vine that's growing in different directions at different times. It doesn't just go straight up like a stalk of corn or something. So when you have the bandwidth and the knowledge that, oh my gosh, the epiphany, I need to stop and think about this. And now that I have more experience and I see where this is going and we might have a dispute coming, pause, take a moment and make a list of who is bringing what to this collaboration. Where are the strengths? Where's the balance of power at this moment? Now, prioritize, okay, because I'm taking your question a little bit broader, and I'm saying, maybe it's not just two parties, but at this point you're thinking, oh my gosh, I really need to look at the whole picture. So number each item, or put it on your put a chart up where you have on the bottom, your x-axis is, the value, the importance of what this person or this company is bringing to the collaboration. And then on the y-axis, what is the level of risk associated with it, right? And so what you can do is you can put, I think it's very helpful to do a graphical representation, and you can just put every collaboration, every relationship on that chart, and then you can see visually which ones are the most risky, which ones are, this was just a contract, service contract, a contract research organization, maybe the collaboration part, that's probably low risk. I don't need to deal with that right now. This one, ooh, it's getting hot, it's getting warm. We need to figure out now, what am I worried about? Has there been a lot of invention? Has there been too much, think about the actual mechanics also of what things are happening, right? Maybe it's not just the contract language. Maybe there's, too much mingling. Maybe you should slow your people down and say, you need to not be working in the same lab, not going over to that other company quite so much. Can we just slow it down and figure out what we want to do?
Yeah, that's really good tips for companies. Do you have anything to add on your side?
Yeah, thanks, Nancy. I really love all the sharing that you've done so far. These are very, very practical tips for the companies who are listening in on how they can deal with this kind of IP issues and collaborations. So, I mean, just a small little add-on. I think if you're already in a collaboration without proper planning, right? Like what Nancy said, stop and think of how you can, address some of the potential risks that you're starting to observe. It really depends on what are you collaborating with the other party on. I would say, try and go back and think of what can you still retain control over when you look at when you go back and look at it. Okay, what can you actually claw back some, restrictions so you can actually limit the other party's unauthorized use maybe of your intangible assets. If it is a commercialization or go-to-market kind of collaboration, right? And your collaborator is someone who is actually friendly and genuine and all this, you can consider going back to renegotiate maybe the commercialization arrangements. It could go by territory. You can say, you can have those territories, can I have these territories, so you don't go into each other's side. That can help you secure your market share. And another way could also be maybe you could arrange some form of a supply arrangements with the collaborators and say, okay, since you are taking these, and then can we make it such that we have an exclusive distributor agreement so that you at least claw back some of these commercial returns from the collaboration. The other day we were actually talking to someone and they were trying to, exit a partnership. I think that is something that you have to be prepared for if the partner is no longer suitable, not meeting your needs, maybe going rogue behind you, then consider how to find someone else to work with and just cut your losses. So that is something that it's the ugly truth, but it's something you should consider as a business that's facing this kind of problem. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Jingwei. Thanks, Nancy. Actually, we do have a couple of questions that people have asked. We'll try to reply the questions privately, as many as we can. But I'm just thinking, there's one question that I hope to answer. But before we go to that question, I'm just thinking if we can get the attendees to help us provide some feedback via the poll questions. While we organize the questions, and then we will try to answer one last question before we end today's session. So we have launched a feedback poll, and so please help us so that we can improve on our future webinar as well.
Oh, Peiwen, I hope I didn't mess you up. I did go ahead and type. I thought, oh my gosh, we're running out of time. So I typed one answer.
Yeah, it's okay. Thanks, Nancy.
Okay.
Let's answer this question, right? So the question is, other than joint ownership of a FIP or IA in the collaborations, are there any alternative? So more clear-cut ways so as to minimize any downstream complication or confusion. So this is the question. Any views from Nancy or Jingwei?
Actually,
yeah.
Don't mind
go ahead,
if I just one main point is that actually generally if it's a commercial thing, right, we tend to encourage not to go for joint ownership. It is very complicated. It's like you are marrying someone and then you're trying to find a way to divorce later on. It's going to be full of assets that are all tied up together. So try to, even if you have a joint ownership, right, in your commercial agreement, you can, like I've said earlier, IP rights can be sliced and diced. So you can already say who is going to take what part of it. So you can have joint ownership where you say, okay, yeah, but the other party has the rights to do all the licensing, all that stuff, So these can, although there are default positions in law, all these can be amended through a properly thought out commercial contract. Yeah, so these are the kind of alternatives you can have even if you have joint IP, but try not to have joint IP ownership if you can. Yeah.
So any alternative, Nancy, would you like to add on?
Yeah, I think it might be along the same lines as what Jinwei was mentioning. You can upfront agree that already the company A would have exclusive rights in the field of agriculture, and company B would have exclusive rights in the field of processed food. And, you could that might help prevent some problems down the line into the future if you agree ahead of time that if there is joint IP, it will be cut up according to what your own business strategies are. Now, if you're both in the same business, then that might be an issue. But if you're both in the same business, then you might not be collaborating quite that closely, right? Then you're competitors.
Right. So I think, this goes back to the same teach, right? A well thought through plan that's important at the beginning of the collaboration. So maybe we just share, before we end, right, we just share the summarized tips from Jingwei. Thank you very much, Nancy and Jingwei, for sharing with us. And if any of you have any questions that you would like to check with Jingwei or Nancy, feel free to connect them on LinkedIn. We have also included contact details of Jingwei, so if you have any questions, do feel free to connect with her directly. And just to mention again, IPOS International is also providing complimentary IA chat sessions for innovative enterprises who require some guidance on their IA/IP journey, or if you have any specific questions on your current collaborations regarding IA/IP creation, feel free to reach out to us. You can sign up via the link or scan the QR code. So once again, my name is Pei Wen, and on behalf of Nancy and Jingwei, we would like to thank you again for spending an hour with us. We hope that this has been useful. And we look forward to seeing you at another IP Expert Series event soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. It was a joy.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thanks a lot.